USS North Carolina, the lead ship of her class, emerged from the horizon, slicing through the waves with determination. Her 9 16-inch guns thundered, hurling 2,700-pound shells toward the distant enemy. The Imperial Japanese Navy fleet approached without hesitation for the dominion of the Pacific. With her engines throbbing, North Carolina charged, guns blazing, to open a gap in the enemy lines. North Carolina's objective was easier said than done: protect the U.S. Navy's aircraft carriers at all costs. As both task forces clashed, her mission turned more difficult. Japanese aircraft swarmed the U.S. vessels, ready to strike them down with either conventional bombs or devastating kamikaze attacks. Still, North Carolina, in her protector role, did not flinch and opened fire with more than 40 guns from her secondary armament. The sky soon turned into a deadly maze of anti-aircraft fire, smoke, and gunfire from American and Japanese fighters. Despite the relentless Japanese waves, North Carolina's thick armor openly defied the enemy bombs and torpedoes, with her crew focused on safeguarding the task force from being scattered by the enemy. USS North Carolina fired salvo after salvo until her barrels ran hot, fending off her attackers as the sun went down. USS North Carolina's keel was laid on Navy Day in October 1937 at the New York Navy Yard in Brooklyn. Her hull was so large by Navy standards at the time that the building ways had to be lengthened and strengthened to accommodate the lead ship of the new battleship class. The vessel was launched on June 13, 1940. During the launch ceremony, Clyde Hoey, governor of North Carolina, said, quote, "Its very power is fascinating. It commands our respect and will help us command the respect of the world. It speaks a language even a dictator can understand." On April 9, 1941, USS North Carolina, the world's fightingest ship, was commissioned in the New York Navy Yard, receiving praise from all major American outlets. Regarding the event, the Young Catholic Messenger wrote, quote, "The 35,000-ton battleship, North Carolina, solid gleaming symbol of America's awakening from a sleepy naval holiday of 18 years. As bugles blared and white-capped officers in blue jackets saluted, a pennant was run slowly up the flagstaff to show that the ship was in commission. Millions listened over the radio as the mightiest battleship afloat was put into service." BB-55 stood as the lead ship of her class, a symbol of cutting-edge naval design. Her imposing silhouette stretched over 700 feet. Armed to the teeth, she boasted 9 16-inch guns. Complementing her main battery were 25-inch guns, both anti-aircraft and dual-purpose, fortifying her against aerial assaults. North Carolina's beating heart lay in her robust power plant, a quartet of oil-fired steam turbines propelling her to a speed of 28 knots. Nevertheless, what truly set North Carolina apart from other ships of her time was a revolutionary protection scheme, which comprised a specialized system of armored belts and decks that shielded her vital machinery and personnel from enemy projectiles. Fondly nicknamed the Showboat, BB-55 spent months testing her systems and undergoing sea trials, following her commission into the U.S. Navy fleet in April 1941. Under the command of her first captain, Olaf M. Hustvedt, North Carolina departed to the Caribbean Sea for her shakedown cruise. Following the surprise Japanese attack against Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, the United States declared war on Japan and Germany. Consequently, BB-55 was ordered to the Pacific Theater for immediate retaliation against the Asian enemy. But first, she was deployed to Naval Station Argentia, Newfoundland, in the Atlantic in April 1942 to block a possible sortie from the German Kriegsmarine's battleship Tirpitz. There were rumors of the imposing commerce raider hunting convoy lanes in the vicinity, but she was never sighted by the Allied forces. Thus, North Carolina departed for the Pacific, arriving in Pearl Harbor on July 11, 1942. Fire Controlman First Class Larry Resin later recalled that upon arrival, quote, "The crews cheered and cheered us. I couldn't help saying to myself, they're cheering us for nothing. We hadn't done anything. We had not fired a single shot yet. But to them, we were the symbol of help finally arriving in force." The Showboat was assigned to Task Force 61 and dispatched to join the fight at Guadalcanal with the help of aircraft carrier Enterprise, light cruiser Atlanta, heavy cruiser Portland, and other destroyers. North Carolina provided critical cover for the landings of the 1st Marine Division. The Leatherneck's objective was simple: seizing the airfield constructed by the Japanese. In addition, North Carolina's batteries and armament roared to protect carrier Enterprise and her aircraft. At the same time, they engaged ground and air targets. The battleship's support was also important to soften up the Japanese stronghold to Lucky Island. Still, not everything proceeded as planned. The Japanese dispatched a cruiser squadron that attacked the U.S. Navy fleet during the night of August 9, 1942, defeating them during the Battle of Savo Island. USS North Carolina protected carrier task forces from further Japanese incursions. The showboat proved her worth during the Battle of the Eastern Solomons, which raged on from August 24th to 25th and saw ferocious encounters between carrier forces from both armies. After sinking the light carrier Ryujo, the Imperial Japanese launched a daring counterattack that was detected by North Carolina's radar. The enemy focused all their efforts on USS Enterprise, sending waves of aircraft and fire against her. As her protector, North Carolina provided as much anti-aircraft fire as possible to cover Enterprise's evasive maneuvers. Several enemy fighters and bombers were shot down, forcing the Japanese to divert their squadrons and strafe directly for North Carolina. Several Aichi D-3A dive bombers attempted to drop their bomb load over North Carolina, but she emerged unscratched from the encounter. The next enemy wave was more successful, taking the life of one sailor and hitting the ship with 3 bombs that did some minor damage. During the engagement against the Japanese carriers, North Carolina took down 8 and 14 enemy aircraft. Following the end of the battle, North Carolina returned to the waters of Guadalcanal to continue guarding the island's Army and Marine Corps units. Imperial Japanese Navy submarines torpedoed the battleship on September 6th. One passed the ship 300 yards off her port side, sparing her from doom. Still, a second strike of 6 torpedoes fired from submarine I-19 on September 15th scored a direct hit on her port side. The hit opened a 32 by 18-foot hole below the waterline, leading to the loss of 5 sailors and a temporary failure that disabled the forward turret. The battleship listed 5.5 degrees to port due to flooding, but kept her bearing and withdrew to Pearl Harbor for repairs. The other ships that comprised the task force were not so lucky. USS Wasp was scuttled, and USS O'Brien sank later due to suffering extensive damage. The showboat underwent repairs from September to November 1942 before joining USS Saratoga and Enterprise for convoy escort operations in the Solomons. As part of Task Force 64, North Carolina guarded ships that delivered troops and supplies for the men fighting at Guadalcanal during the rest of 1942 and the early months of 1943. She then returned to a safe port for a refit and the installation of more sophisticated radars in preparation for the upcoming Allied landings on the Gilbert Islands. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Pacific waters with intense hues, North Carolina stood high among the members of Task Force 50.2. The mission was clear: support the assaults on the Gilberts and Marshall Islands, which include Tarawa, Macon, and Apamama. With the support of additional vessels, North Carolina stormed hostile waters and raided the islands in November 1943. As the turmoil of war raged on, her cannons roared time and time again to silence the Japanese guns concealed deep inside the jungles. Besides her naval artillery bombardments to pummel enemy fortifications, the showboat filled the horizon with fire and smoke, shielding the U.S. carriers from enemy aircraft. December 8th brought a new directive. Detached from the fleet, North Carolina now sailed with her fellow Massachusetts, Indiana, South Dakota, and Washington for the Marianas under the command of Admiral Mitcher. Nauru Island was the last objective to be decimated before North Carolina departed for the new campaign. On January 6, 1944, North Carolina and the task force were quick to engage the might of Japan during the Battle of Kwajalein, where she unleashed her wrath with multiple preparatory bombardments. The battleship then momentarily abandoned the carriers and steamed toward Roy Namur, where her guns struck the Japanese with lethal accuracy, eliminating the enemy with swift and consistent blows. North Carolina became part of Operation Hailstone to raid the island of Truk, the Empire's most important staging area in the region. Once again, Task Force 58.3 and North Carolina pummeled the enemy fortifications, raining down havoc without truce, leaving Truk's might shattered for the rest of the conflict. What followed was a series of island raids to suffocate Japanese strongholds. The Pacific became North Carolina's playground. From Palau to Waliai and Hollandia to Truk, the battleship's guns roared with determination, eliminating anything that stood in her way. From Japanese aircraft to island fortifications, the sky and the ground trembled with each salvo fired, signaling the enemy that the showboat was there to stay until the last enemy surrendered. After a refit in May 1944, North Carolina was back in the game to strike the Marianas. Task Group 58.7 was distributed between 4 carrier task groups, which began the assault against the island of Saipan on June 6, 1944. North Carolina's main battery bombarded the island mercilessly to soften up the defenses for the U.S. Marines and protect the minesweepers that cleared the path for the beachhead. North Carolina's guns also screened the carriers. They later shelled Tonopah Harbor, destroying vital enemy supply dumps and sinking small Japanese vessels. The Japanese attempted a naval counterattack, but failed to achieve any considerable gap, with North Carolina fending off a wave of enemy aircraft. The Imperial Navy struck harder a second time with the 1st Mobile Fleet, the main carrier strike force. North Carolina and her group steamed toward the enemy and clashed on June 18th in the Battle of the Philippine Sea, which raged for 2 days. With the support of 4 cruisers and 13 destroyers, North Carolina resisted the first enemy blow, leading her to counterattack with lethal anti-aircraft fire. Although the battle was fought primarily by the carriers, North Carolina and the rest of the U.S. Navy fleet inflicted serious losses on the Japanese, destroying hundreds of their aircraft and sinking 3 carriers, crippling the Imperial Navy for the remainder of the war. In the course of the naval engagements, North Carolina shot down 2 Japanese aircraft and incapacitated countless others. Following an overhaul at the Puget Sound Navy Yard in North Carolina, her seasoned crew once again set sail to attack the Japanese scattered around the Philippines. As part of Task Group 38.3, North Carolina launched strikes on Japanese positions in Leyte, Luzon, and the Visayas. During these assaults, North Carolina survived a kamikaze attack by shooting down the aircraft before it got within range. On December 18, 1944, the Typhoon Cobra struck North Carolina's group, but she survived nature's encounter unscathed. Still, there was no rest for the colossal battleship. In January 1945, she struck Formosa, Indochina, and China, decimating the Japanese garrisons. 1 month later, North Carolina guarded Navy carriers attacking Honshu. As the U.S. military got closer to mainland Japan, she began to support attacks on Tokyo and the Bonin Islands. In April, during the onslaught of Okinawa, North Carolina fended off several kamikaze assaults, taking down 3 in the intense aerial engagements. Weeks later, an intense air-naval counterattack, led by the waning Japanese military, was met with North Carolina's iron will. As the destruction of Japan continued without any signs of surrender, the U.S. began targeting Tokyo. With Japan burning, the Navy Task Group withdrew from Japan as another typhoon reached the homeland. Then came the surrender after the 2 atomic bombs. The imposing and veteran battleship occupied Japan in the aftermath, before returning to the United States to wrap up her legendary wartime service. USS North Carolina was decommissioned in New York on June 27, 1947. She remained a training vessel for midshipmen, and later went to Bayonne, New Jersey, to become part of the inactive reserve fleet. The Navy tried modernizing the vessel, but the program was canceled in the 1950s. A decade later, the battleship was bound for the scrapyard, but the state citizens launched a campaign to preserve the iconic World War II vessel. Funds were raised to prepare a berth and move North Carolina from Bayonne to Wilmington. The campaign saved the ship, and the showboat arrived at Cape Fear River near Southport, North Carolina in October 1961. She was then modified and preserved as the state's war memorial. North Carolina's legacy and her 12 battle stars live on until this very day, with the thousands of visitors she receives each year to honor the men who gave their lives for history's most devastating conflict.